The jungle was alive. Thick vines curled around ancient trees, their trunks so wide that 5 men standing side by side wouldn't be able to wrap their arms around them. Brightly colored birds screeched from the canopy above, their cries echoing through the dense greenery. Insects buzzed in a steady hum, blending with the distant roar of a hidden waterfall. Every step forward felt like pushing against an invisible wall of heat and thick, damp air. Dr. Jahi Okoro wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. His shirt clung to his skin, soaked through from the relentless humidity. He adjusted the straps of his backpack and looked over his shoulder at the rest of the team. "Keep moving," he said, his deep voice calm but firm. "We're losing daylight." Amara stepped forward, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. She was younger than the others, in her early 20s, with sharp brown eyes that were always searching, always thinking. Unlike Jahi, who had spent his life leading expeditions, this was her first time in the jungle. But she wasn't here for the treasure or the fame. She was here for her father. She brushed her fingers against the stone obelisk they had found moments earlier. The ancient pillar was covered in strange markings, words carved into the surface long ago. Some symbols were barely visible under layers of moss, but one phrase stood out clearly. "Only the pure of heart shall pass. The deceivers shall perish." Amara read the words aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. A cold feeling crept into her chest. "This is a warning," she said. "But it doesn't say from what." Jahi walked up beside her, running a gloved hand over the rough stone. "It means we should be careful," he said. "Stay close, everyone." The team pressed forward. Their machetes sliced through tangled vines as they moved deeper into the jungle. The path was barely visible, swallowed by nature over centuries. Somewhere in this wilderness, hidden from the world, lay the lost city of Ujara. Stories told of golden temples and ancient relics, of secrets long buried beneath the earth. But few who had searched for the city had ever returned. And Amara's father had been one of them. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay focused. She wouldn't turn back. She couldn't. The group continued in silence, listening to the sounds of the jungle. Every so often, a branch cracked in the distance, or leaves rustled where no wind was blowing. Amara noticed it first, the strange feeling of being watched. "Jahi," she whispered. He turned, noticing the look in her eyes. He had spent enough time in places like this to know when something wasn't right. He raised a hand, signaling for the others to stop. The jungle around them had fallen silent. No birds. No insects. No movement. Then, whoosh! An arrow flew through the air, striking a tree trunk just inches from one of the explorers. The sharp thunk of wood against wood sent a jolt of panic through the group. "Down!" Jahi shouted. Everyone dropped to the ground, searching for cover behind tree roots and rocks. More arrows sliced through the air, some embedding themselves in the dirt nearby. Amara's heart pounded as she pressed herself against a fallen log, her breathing quick and shallow. From the shadows between the trees, figures began to appear. Tall men with painted faces and bodies covered in swirling white markings. They moved with quiet grace, their bare feet making no sound against the earth. Each carried a bow, their arrows already drawn and aimed. Jahi slowly raised his hands, showing he was unarmed. "We don't mean harm," he said, his voice steady. The warriors did not lower their weapons. They stepped closer, their dark eyes unreadable. Amara counted at least a dozen of them, surrounding the group completely. A man at the front of the warriors stepped forward. His skin was dark and lined with age, but his body was strong, his movements sure. He carried no weapon, only a carved staff. His gaze landed on Amara. His expression changed, just slightly. A flicker of recognition in his eyes. "You," he said, his voice deep and firm. "You have your father's eyes." Amara's breath caught in her throat. "You knew my father?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded slowly. He turned to the others and said something in a language Amara didn't understand. At once, the warriors lowered their bows. The tension in the air remained, but the immediate threat had passed. Jahi helped one of the explorers to his feet, still keeping a cautious eye on their captors. "Who are you?" he asked. "And how do you know Amara's father?" The old man studied him for a moment before speaking again. "My name is Elder Muta," he said. I am the keeper of the path to Ujara. A quiet murmur ran through the group. They had found someone who knew the way. But that meant... Amara stepped closer. Is the city real? She asked. Does Ujara exist? Elder Muta smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. Yes, he said. And it is not a place for outsiders. Jahi exchanged a glance with Amara. They had come too far to turn back now. We have to see it, Amara said firmly. I need to know what happened to my father. The old man studied her carefully. Then, with a slow nod, he turned and gestured for them to follow. If you wish to find Ujara, he said, then you must pass the trials. The same ones your father faced before you. Amara felt her pulse quicken. The jungle seemed darker now, the trees taller, the air heavier. Whatever lay ahead would not be easy. But she had already made her choice. She took a deep breath, glanced at Jahi, and stepped forward. The journey to the lost city had begun. The jungle opened up into a clearing, revealing an ancient village hidden deep within the wilderness. Stone huts, covered in creeping vines, stood in clusters, their walls adorned with faded carvings of animals, warriors, and gods. Fires flickered in hollowed-out stone chambers, casting long shadows on the ground. The air smelled of burning wood and damp earth. It was a place untouched by time, a place where the past still breathed. Amara and the others followed Elder Muta into the heart of the village. The warriors who had captured them walked close behind, their expressions unreadable. Children peeked out from behind the huts, their eyes wide with curiosity. Women, dressed in garments woven from jungle fibers, watched in silence. It was clear that outsiders rarely, if ever, came here. Jahi stepped beside Amara and whispered, "This village. It's older than anything we've seen. It might be as old as Ujara itself." Elder Muta stopped before a large stone platform in the village center. Upon it stood a massive carving of a man sitting on a throne, his arms resting on the heads of two large lions. The statue was cracked and weathered, but the power in its form remained. "This is King Ujara," Muta said. "The one who built the city you seek." Amara stepped closer, examining the detailed carvings at the base of the statue. "What happened to him?" she asked. Muta's expression darkened. "He became too powerful. The gods tested him, and he failed." A murmur ran through the villagers. Muta turned his gaze to the group. "Ujara is not just a city. It is a test. Many have searched for it, believing it holds wealth beyond measure. But only those who prove themselves worthy may pass." Jahi folded his arms. "And how do we prove ourselves worthy?" Muta's gaze settled on Amara. "By facing the 3 trials of the ancestors. The same trials your father took before you." Amara's breath caught. "My father was here. He passed the trials." Muta hesitated before answering. "He passed the first 2. But he never returned from the 3rd. A cold wave of fear rushed through her, but she pushed it aside. She had come too far to turn back now. "Then I will finish what he started. I'll pass the trials." Muta studied her carefully, then nodded. "Then prepare yourself, child of the Lost One. For the path ahead is not for the weak." He turned to the warriors and gave a command in their native tongue. They moved swiftly, gathering supplies and preparing for what lay ahead. One of them, a woman with piercing eyes and a curved blade at her waist, stepped forward. "I am Nyoka," she said. "I will guide you through the first trial." Jahi tightened his grip on his pack. "What is the first trial?" Muta raised his staff, pointing toward the dense jungle beyond the village. "The path of shadows. There, you will face the spirits of those who failed before you." A hush fell over the village. Even the warriors averted their eyes at the mention of the path of shadows. Amara swallowed hard but held her ground. "Then let's go." With Nyoka leading the way, the group set off into the jungle once more, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. The trials had begun. The jungle grew darker as Amara, Jahi, and the others followed Nyoka into the depths of the wilderness. Towering trees blocked out most of the sunlight, their twisted branches creating eerie shapes against the dimming sky. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and unseen dangers. Nyoka walked ahead, her every step precise and sure. "The path of shadows is cursed," she said without turning around. It is where the spirits of those who failed the trials wander, trapped between the world of the living and the dead. Jahi tightened his grip on his machete. And how do we make it through? Nyoka finally stopped and turned to face them. You must not listen to the voices. They will whisper to you, tempt you, make you doubt. If you answer them, if you stray from the path, you will be lost. Amara swallowed hard. She had come this far, but the weight of her father's disappearance pressed on her like a stone. If he had walked this path before her, what had he heard? What had led him astray? The group pressed forward, their footsteps barely making a sound against the damp earth. The deeper they went, the more the jungle felt wrong. The silence became unnatural, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Then, the whispers began. Soft at first, barely noticeable. A breeze that wasn't really wind. But soon, the voices became clearer. Amara. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. Father, she whispered before she could stop herself. Jahi grabbed her arm. Don't. She bit her lip, nodding, forcing herself to keep moving. The whispers continued, calling to each of them in different voices. Some were soft and pleading, others cruel and mocking. Nyoka led them deeper into the path, her pace never slowing. The darkness seemed alive, shifting, pressing in on them. Shadows moved where there were no people, figures standing just beyond their sight. One of the explorers behind Amara gasped. Mother! He turned toward the shadows, his voice breaking. Is that you? No. Nyoka snapped. Keep walking. But it was too late. The man stepped off the path. A scream echoed through the jungle, cut off as suddenly as it began. The group froze, their breaths shallow. The explorer was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Amara's hands trembled. Jahi's jaw clenched. No one spoke. We do not stop, Nyoka said, her voice firm. Move. No. The path twisted and turned, the jungle growing colder with every step. The whispers grew louder, angrier, more insistent. But they kept walking, fighting against the invisible pull that threatened to drag them into the unknown. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the whispers stopped. The trees parted, and they stepped into an open clearing bathed in silver moonlight. In the center stood an ancient stone archway, covered in moss and glowing faintly with strange symbols. Nyoka let out a slow breath. You have passed the first trial. The path of shadows has let you through. Amara glanced over her shoulder at the dark jungle behind them. They had survived, but not all of them. And this was only the beginning. Ahead, beyond the archway, lay the next trial. The River of Truth. The ancient stone archway loomed before them, covered in moss and glowing faintly under the moonlight. Beyond it, the jungle sloped downward, revealing a slow-moving river that shimmered in an unnatural way. The water wasn't clear or murky, but instead a deep, shifting silver, as if it held the reflections of 1,000 unseen faces. Nyoka stepped forward, her expression unreadable. This is the River of Truth, she said. It sees through the lies we tell others and the lies we tell ourselves. If you are not ready to face your truth, the river will take you. Amara exchanged a nervous glance with Jahi. They had survived the path of shadows, but this was different. The jungle had played tricks on their minds, but the river would force them to face what they feared most. Jahi stepped forward. How do we cross? Nyoka pointed to a series of smooth stones protruding from the river, forming a jagged path. You must walk across. The river will call to you. If you lose yourself to it, you will sink. She turned to Amara, her sharp gaze piercing. Many do not make it. Be certain you are strong enough. Amara clenched her fists. I don't have a choice. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the first stone. A cold shock ran through her as whispers rose from the river, the voices overlapping, rising, falling, wrapping around her like unseen hands. You are not ready. You will fail like he did. He called for you, and you were not there. Amara's foot slipped, and she barely caught herself. The whispers had changed. They weren't just voices, they were her thoughts, her doubts, her pain. She squeezed her eyes shut and took another step forward. Behind her, Jahi followed, his face tense with focus. One by one, the others stepped onto the stones. The air grew heavier with each passing second. Then Amara heard it, a voice she had longed for, dreaded, missed every day since he disappeared. Amara. Her breath caught in her throat. It was her father's voice. Clear. Real. I need you, Amara. I never meant to leave. Her vision blurred. The river rippled around her feet, its surface shifting, showing an image, her father standing on the riverbank, his hand outstretched. Come to me, Amara. Save me. Her foot lifted off the stone, moving toward the water before she even realized it. No. Jahi's voice snapped through her daze. His hand gripped her wrist, pulling her back. That's not real. Keep moving. Amara blinked, her father's image vanishing into the rippling water. Her chest ached, but she nodded. Together, they moved forward, stepping from stone to stone, resisting the whispers, the illusions, the truths they weren't ready to face. One of the explorers behind them faltered. It's my wife. She's calling to me. She. He stepped off the stone. The river surged, and in an instant, he was gone. Swallowed by the silver depths. Amara forced herself not to look, not to listen. She stepped onto the final stone and leaped onto the riverbank. Jahi landed beside her, his breathing heavy. One by one, the survivors emerged, shaken but alive. Nyoka stood waiting. You have crossed the river of truth. The worst is yet to come. Amara's heart pounded. If this wasn't the worst, she wasn't sure how much more she could take. Ahead, the final trial awaited. The jungle path led them to a massive stone gate, half buried in vines. Beyond it, a towering temple stretched toward the sky, its weathered carvings barely visible beneath centuries of overgrowth. The air felt heavier here, thick with the weight of unseen eyes watching their every move. Nyoka halted at the base of the temple steps. This is the final trial. The trial of the king. Only those who prove themselves worthy may enter Ujara. Amara clenched her fists, her father's face still fresh in her mind from the river's illusions. What do we have to do? Nyoka pointed to the entrance. Inside, you will find the throne of King Ujara. To sit upon it, you must prove you are more than a seeker of treasure. You must show that you understand the burden of a ruler. Jahi exhaled sharply. And how do we do that? By facing your deepest fear and choosing sacrifice over power. The stone doors groaned as Nyoka pushed them open, revealing a dark corridor lined with flickering torches. One by one, they stepped inside. The chamber beyond was enormous, the throne of Ujara towering at the far end, bathed in a golden glow. The walls were carved with images of warriors, kings, and gods, stories of power and loss, victory and sacrifice. Amara took a step forward, but the moment her foot touched the stone, the room shifted. Shadows rose from the walls, taking shape, forming figures of the past. Warriors with hollow eyes, kings with sorrowful faces, whispers of choices made and paths lost. Then, the voice came. Who among you dares claim the throne of Ujara? A figure emerged, a man in golden armor, his eyes burning with the weight of history. The spirit of King Ujara himself. Prove your worth, the king commanded. Show me that you understand what it means to rule. The ground beneath them trembled. The warriors stepped forward, their ghostly weapons drawn. The trial had begun. The ghostly warriors advanced, their hollow eyes locked onto Amara and the others. The air shimmered with an unnatural energy, heavy and oppressive. The spirit of King Ujara stood tall, his golden armor gleaming despite the dim torchlight. His voice echoed through the chamber, carrying the weight of centuries. A ruler does not seek power but bears its weight. Show me you understand. The warriors lunged. Jahi barely dodged a spectral blade, his breath ragged. How do we fight ghosts? He shouted, swinging his machete. The weapon passed through the warrior harmlessly, sending ripples through the air like disturbed water. We don't. Nyoka called back. This is not a trial of strength. Amara's mind raced. Her father had made it this far, but he had never returned. What had he missed? What had he failed to see? Then it hit her. Drop your weapons, she yelled. Jahi stared at her. Are you crazy? Just do it. One by one, they let their weapons clatter to the stone floor. The warriors hesitated, their spectral forms flickering. Amara took a deep breath and stepped forward, placing a hand over her heart. I do not seek the throne for power. I seek truth, wisdom, and the burden that comes with it. The spirit of King Ujara studied her, his burning gaze unreadable. And what would you sacrifice for it? The throne behind him began to glow, its golden surface shifting to reveal images of rulers past, each of them weary, burdened, alone. Amara felt a lump in her throat. Her father had come here seeking answers, but had he been willing to pay the price? Had he refused the sacrifice and been cast out? She took another step forward. I would sacrifice my desires, my pride, my ignorance. A true ruler does not take, they give. Silence filled the chamber. Then, slowly, the ghostly warriors lowered their weapons and vanished into mist. The spirit of King Ujara nodded solemnly. Then you are worthy. The temple walls trembled, the throne's glow intensifying. A hidden door slid open behind it, revealing a passageway deeper into the temple. Nyoka exhaled in relief. You have passed. But what lies ahead is beyond any trial. Amara squared her shoulders, determination burning in her eyes. Then we keep going. With that, they stepped into the unknown. The narrow passageway beyond the throne was carved from smooth stone, its walls adorned with ancient inscriptions that shimmered faintly in the dim light. The air was heavy, filled with the scent of age and secrecy. As Amara led the group forward, their footsteps echoed eerily, swallowed by the depths of the temple. Jahi ran his fingers over the inscriptions. These markings, they tell of a vault. A sacred chamber that holds the true heart of Ujara. Nyoka's eyes narrowed. Then we are close. But the final trial may still await. The passage opened into a vast underground chamber. At its center, a raised pedestal held an object wrapped in cloth, pulsating with an eerie golden glow. Around it, statues of long-forgotten kings stood as silent sentinels, their hollow eyes staring through time. Amara approached cautiously. This must be it. The secret my father sought. She reached out, hesitating only a moment before unwrapping the cloth. Beneath it lay a golden medallion, intricately designed with the sigil of Ujara, its surface inscribed with ancient text. Jahi's voice was hushed. That's not just treasure. That's knowledge. A record of the first rulers, their sacrifices. Everything that was lost. As Amara lifted the medallion, the statues trembled. Dust and stone cracked as the air grew dense. A deep voice, neither living nor dead, rumbled through the chamber. The one who takes the wisdom must bear its cost. Are you prepared? The walls shook, the ground beneath them shifting. A doorway on the far end of the chamber creaked open, revealing another path. A choice had been given. Nyoka looked at Amara. We can leave now, take what we came for. Or we go deeper, and face what your father could not. Amara tightened her grip on the medallion, her heart pounding. She had come too far to stop now. We go deeper. With one last glance at the shifting statues, they stepped through the open doorway, into the heart of Ujara. The passage twisted downward, the air thick with dust and mystery. The glow from Amara's torch cast flickering shadows along the carved stone walls, where faded murals depicted the rise and fall of the lost kingdom. Every step deeper into the temple sent a hush through the group, the weight of their journey pressing in on them. As they emerged into a vast underground hall, they froze. The chamber was breathtaking. A massive pool of crystal-clear water stretched before them, its surface reflecting the golden ceiling that shimmered like the sky at dawn. At the center of the pool, an ancient obsidian obelisk rose from the water, covered in glowing inscriptions. Jahi sucked in a breath. The heart of Ujara. It's real. Nyoka's expression was unreadable. This is where history was written and lost. Amara stepped closer, the medallion she carried pulsing in her hands. As if drawn by an unseen force, she approached the edge of the pool. The inscriptions on the obelisk flared brighter as she neared, and a deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber. One who seeks the truth must give themselves to it. The water rippled. The ground trembled. The murals along the walls shifted, as if telling a story lost to time. Visions of ancient rulers, wars, betrayals, and the downfall of Ujara played before their eyes. Amara's heartbeat quickened. It's speaking to us. The truth of Ujara. Jahi reached for her arm. But what does it want? Before she could answer, the floor beneath them lurched, and the water of the pool rose, forming tendrils of liquid gold that reached toward them. The air buzzed with energy. Nyoka's voice was urgent. It's testing us. We need to decide, do we take the knowledge and leave, or do we offer ourselves to the truth? Amara looked down at the medallion in her hands, then at the obelisk. This was the moment her father had faced. The moment that had cost him everything. She took a breath, steadied herself, and made her choice. The golden tendrils of water pulsed, swirling around Amara and her team. The ancient energy of Ujara vibrated through the chamber, resonating in their bones. The obelisk continued to glow, its inscriptions shifting as if rewriting history in real time. Amara took a cautious step forward, feeling the weight of destiny pressing upon her. The medallion in her hand burned with an intense warmth. One who seeks the truth must give themselves to it, the voice echoed again, surrounding them. Jahi clenched his fists. What does it mean? Give ourselves how? Nyoka studied the obelisk. It's not asking for a sacrifice of blood, she murmured. It's asking for trust. Amara inhaled deeply and met Nyoka's gaze. If this is what my father faced, I have to finish what he started. Without hesitation, she pressed the medallion against the obelisk. A blinding light erupted from the stone, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. The water surged upwards, creating a cascading column of gold that engulfed the chamber. Images flooded Amara's mind, visions of Ujara's past, the rise and fall of kings, the betrayals that led to its downfall. And then, she saw him. Her father, standing before the same obelisk, his face etched with the same determination she now felt. Amara. His voice was distant, a mere whisper through time. The truth is a burden, but it is also freedom. Tears welled in her eyes. Father, what did you choose? The vision swirled, fading as the golden water receded. When she opened her eyes, the obelisk had darkened, its energy spent. The medallion in her hand was no longer warm, it was simply metal now, its purpose fulfilled. Jahi and Nyoka looked around as the chamber settled into silence. Did we pass? Jahi asked, his voice hushed. Amara turned toward them, her heart steady. We didn't take the truth. We became part of it. The far wall of the chamber trembled and then slowly opened, revealing a hidden passageway leading into the unknown. Nyoka exhaled. Then the journey is not over. With renewed determination, they stepped forward, leaving the chamber of the past behind, and walking toward the future that awaited beyond the final door. The hidden passage stretched ahead, its walls lined with glowing symbols that pulsed with a faint golden hue. The air was different here, cooler, charged with an energy that sent shivers down Amara's spine. Jahi ran his fingers across the inscriptions, his eyes narrowing in thought. These symbols, they're different from the ones above, he murmured. They speak of something beyond the throne, something deeper. Nyoka took a slow step forward, her body tense. This is not just a tomb. It is a gateway. Amara clenched her fists. A gateway to what? No one had the answer. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The passage twisted and turned, descending deeper into the earth. The further they went, the more the golden glow of the walls intensified, as though the chamber itself was alive and aware of their presence. Then they reached it. A massive stone door stood before them, carved with a sigil they had never seen before. Unlike the worn symbols of the upper temple, this was pristine, untouched by time. The air grew heavy, pressing down on them. Jahi exhaled slowly. This is it. The true secret of Ujara. Amara stepped forward, placing her palm on the door. The stone was warm beneath her touch, vibrating slightly, as if waiting for something. A deep, resonant voice filled the chamber, not from the walls but from within their own minds. The worthy have come. The choice remains. Nyoka stiffened. What choice? The door trembled. Dust rained from above. The inscriptions along the walls flickered wildly, shifting, rewriting themselves in an instant. Amara met Jahi's gaze. There's only one way to find out. With a deep breath, she pushed against the stone. The door groaned and slowly began to open, revealing a vast chamber bathed in golden light. At its center stood a floating crystal, its core swirling with images of a past long forgotten. It was knowledge, power, and history, all contained within a single fragment of Ujara's soul. Amara stepped forward, the weight of her journey pressing down on her. She had chased shadows, followed the footsteps of her father, faced trials beyond imagination. And now, she had reached the truth. "We came for answers," she whispered. "And we found them." Jahi and Nyoka stood beside her, staring at the glowing heart of Ujara. But they all knew, this was not a treasure to be taken, not a prize to be claimed. It was a legacy to be protected. Amara turned away, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "Let's go." The chamber's golden light flickered in farewell as they stepped back through the door. Behind them, the entrance sealed itself, locking Ujara's secrets away once more. But now, those secrets had found guardians. As they emerged from the temple into the warm light of dawn, Amara breathed in the fresh air, the jungle stretching out before them. She had come searching for the past, but she was leaving with something greater, the future. And with that, their journey ended, but the legend of Ujara lived on.